We are happy to host this in partnership with these fantastic partners. And this is our series, Offshore Renewable Energy, Learning as We Go. I will just go right ahead and hand the mic over to you, Jen.
Thank you so much. So thanks, Toonie, and thank our panelists and our participants rolling in to engage in this conversation. We really appreciate it. Again, my name is Jen McCann, and I'm at the University of Rhode Island Coastal Resources Center and Rhode Island Sea Grant, and we're part of the Graduate School of Oceanography. This is our 4th session, focusing on the roles of research platforms and community engagement. As many of you, as you all know, as our nation is looking to grow its production of renewable energy, what does this mean for working waterfronts in terms of creating new jobs, revitalizing harbors, and also increasing demand for waterfront space and potentially displacing traditional waterfront uses or not. And so today we're going to be talking about the role of research platforms and pilot projects in advancing ocean technologies, offshore renewable energy, and talk a little bit about these different stories and how potentially these research platform and these pilot projects are helping us to learn about siting of offshore wind, engaging with working waterfronts, and also keeping stakeholders involved and engaged in a process. We have 3 amazing panelists we'll be introducing in a minute. I do want to recognize the National Working Waterfront Network, who is our partner here for this webinar. I would like to thank Kenneth Walker, who's a program analyst for NOAA, and also Laura Casali, who's again part of the executive board, but also works for Saltwater Inc. And I'm going to pass it off to our moderator, Kristen, who's going to talk a bit about the National Working Waterfront Network. Kristen?
Thanks, Jen, and thanks again, Jen, for all of the work that you did to put this webinar together. Thanks to our speakers for all of their hard work, and to all of you who are attending. My name is Kristen Uterwick. I'm the director of the Urban Harbors Institute. The Urban Harbors Institute is an applied research institute at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, where, among other things, we work with coastal communities to better understand and address the needs and opportunities that occur when people exist on the interface between land and sea. Many of our projects involve working with communities to provide guidance on topics including coastal infrastructure, community development and community preservation, the impacts of climate change, public access to the waterfront, and others. And through my role at UHI, I'm also a member of the executive committee of the National Working Waterfronts Network, which is co-sponsoring this webinar. The National Working Waterfront Network is a nationwide network of all sorts of groups, businesses, industry associations, nonprofit entities, government entities, universities, sea grant programs like Jen's, and even individuals. And all of us are dedicated to supporting and preserving and enhancing our nation's working waterfronts and waterways. Participation in the network is free and is open to anyone who's involved in working waterfront issues. We're talking about large ports all the way down to small harbors. We welcome everyone. Our mission is to increase the capacity of coastal communities and stakeholders to make informed decisions, balance diverse uses, ensure access, and plan for the future of their working waterfronts and waterways. Like many organizations during COVID, we've needed to find new ways to engage our members. And so we've embarked on this initiative to provide webinars, such as this one. Our first webinar was in partnership with NOAA, and it focused on their economic resources for working waterfront communities. In addition, the network has a podcast series that covers a wide range of working waterfront topics, such as aquaculture, offshore wind, coastal resilience. These podcasts and the webinar are all available on our website, which is nationalworkingwaterfronts.com. There you can also find other resources pertaining to working waterfronts and sign up for our newsletter or join our listserv. Our listserv is a great resource for sharing articles and funding opportunities and learning about events like this, as well as about our next symposium, which is currently being planned, but looks like it might be in Boston next summer. And with that, I'll turn it back to Jen.
Great, thank you, Kristen. So we wanted to just get to know our panelists a little bit more. So I've asked each one of them to talk a little bit about who you are and describe the purpose of your project. Who are the major players and roles? What is the status of your project? And I think most importantly, what are you most proud of? So Dan, why don't you go first?
Thanks, Jen. I'm Dan Helene. I'm the Deputy Director of PacWave. PacWave is a wave energy test facility off the coast of Oregon. We offer open water testing capabilities, including grid connection to developers of wave energy converters and related technology. We don't do the testing of this type of technology. We provide the infrastructure to allow these clients to do the testing. The major players in this project, Oregon State University is a key one. That's where PacWave is based. Obviously, another major one is the US Department of Energy, who's our primary funder for this project. We also have a lot of funding support from the state of Oregon itself and from Oregon State University. Other major players, the local community and stakeholders have been critical to this project, particularly the fishing community, represented by a group called Fishermen Involved in Natural Energy, who represent all the different fisheries in the central coast of Oregon. Also key stakeholders our state and federal delegation, the marine energy industry, the marine industry in general, and state and federal agencies who have been very involved in everything. The status of our project, our primary test site, which is PacWave South, we have just completed our 8 years of permitting process for the project. We received our BOEM research lease in mid-February of this month and our FERC license at the beginning of March. We're now hoping to move into the construction phase in the next few weeks and be operational in 2023. What to be proud of about the project, I think everyone who's been involved in the project is just proud of what we've achieved so far and where we've got to. This is a unique project and it's taken an enormous amount of creative thinking and brainstorming and collaboration to get to where we are. So I think there's a lot of pride in that and also a certain amount of relief that we're transitioning from the permitting stage into the construction stage. So I think, yeah, that sort of sums it up and I'll pass it back.
Great, thank you, Dan. That was a great summary. And I just want to remind you all that the three panelists have recorded extensive videos on their projects, and they're really interesting and very clear. So really appreciate that. Jake, would you please go next?
Sure. I'm going to try to run through your questions. My name is Jake Ward. I'm Vice President for Innovation and Economic Development at the University of Maine, and I'm part of the Maine offshore wind team since we started this effort back in 2006. I have a background in mechanical and ocean engineering, but been an administrator in government relations and economic development, business development for the better part of 30 years. Our project, which we call New England Aqua Ventus 1, is a project funded under the Department of Energy Advanced Technology Demonstration Program. It is a demonstration R&D program to demonstrate a full-scale, commercial-scale floating wind turbine to be located in the state of Maine test site, which is located 2.5 miles south of Monhegan Island, about 14 miles off the mainland. That is in state waters, which is a very important piece to this. The purpose is really to demonstrate that a technology designed specifically to survive in the Gulf of Maine, to generate electricity in the mid-ocean conditions in the Gulf of Maine, but also that can be manufactured locally, local construction, local components. So we're using a precast concrete bridge construction technology. So the floating semi-submersible hull is made out of concrete. So we get a chance to generate local electricity as well as the economic opportunity to create the jobs in the manufacturing and the operation and maintenance. So this is all a proof of concept project around that. And at the same time, being located in a state waters test site, which is a lobster conservation zone for the Monhegan Island, is limited fishery. So we have a chance to work with a small group of fishermen to really look at the coexistence around one floating turbine before we move forward to building larger numbers. The major players from the University of Maine, we have our DOE grant that's helping fund the construction. We do the design and engineering. We're supporting permitting as well as the environmental ecological work. As recently as August 2020, we have a private developer who's taken over the development of the project, New England Aqua Ventus LLC, which is a joint venture of Diamond Offshore Wind, division of Mitsubishi, and RWE Renewables. They are the project developer, the owner, the operator, and they bring the balance of project investment. The status is we're still in the development stage, ongoing, continuing to follow up on environmental studies, baseline studies, to be able to support NEPA. We've done the initial stages of getting to the NEPA point. We expect the NEPA public sessions to start in the next few months. And the Department of Energy is the lead on the NEPA. We have no permits or applications submitted yet. It's part of the state statute, the sequence of what we're going. So collecting all that information. And we just, the project just completed the geographic and geological subsea survey this month. So for locating the final location of the turbine and the cable pathway to shore. I guess what I'd say most proud of, a lot of our stakeholder engagement, community outreach, there's been a lot of starts and stops. We've been doing this since 2009 when the test site was located, and for a variety of reasons, everything from political, economical to social starts and stops. So finally in 2017, we were able to, working through Monhegan, the Monhegan Energy Task Force, to finalize a community benefit agreement that was completed in 2017. And then in December of 2020, we made our first payment to the Monhegan community. So a lot of work to get there. I guess that's the where we are right now, and I'd pass it back after.
Great. And thank you, Jake. Our last webinar, we did focus on community benefits, and we had a representative from Monhegan Island there, and she talked about the value of having a community benefit and providing clarity and really an opportunity to engage stakeholders. So really impressive. That's an impressive agreement that you guys developed. Matthew.
Yeah, thanks. My name is Matthew Marshall. I'm the executive director of the Redwood Coast Energy Authority. We're a local government joint powers agency up in Humboldt County on the north coast of California. And we work on sustainable energy initiatives. A big part of that is we're a community choice aggregator. So we're responsible for the electricity supply to about 64,000 customers locally. And what we're working on is as part of our goal of providing electricity that's renewable and local, is hopefully developing an offshore wind project here off the coast of Humboldt County. We're scaling that to sort of the transmission constraints and sort of something in the range of 120 to 150 megawatts, which is about 10 or so turbines at the scale of offshore wind, sort of current technology or near-term technology. And we approach that from a goal of trying to have it be sort of a community-led process. So we actually issued a request for qualifications back in 2018 for development partners, in the sense that we're interested in buying the power. We realize we don't necessarily have the local technical and financial capabilities to do that single-handedly. So we reached out to offshore wind developers and said we're interested in really doing a sort of a public-private partnership model to move this forward, and we got a strong response from that. We selected a team of companies that includes EDP Renewables, or their offshore wind venture, Ocean Winds, Aker Solutions, which is a Norwegian company that does a lot of ocean engineering, manufacturing, technology development, and then Principal Power, which is a California-based company that develops the floating foundation, which is similarly to Maine. We've got deep water off our coast, so we need floating foundations, which is something that's maturing, and particularly in Europe, but I'm hoping to bring that to California. As far as other partners and players in this, we're looking at federal waters. So obviously there's the BOEM and state process for that kind of a development. And I joke, but I think it's probably true that doing something in federal waters that has elements that cross California state waters and then goes onto the land in California probably is like the most rigorous permitting process you could have on planet Earth. And in California, we're known for our diligence of process and our concern for the environment and permitting, and so I don't think anyone would claim that doing things in California as far as large development is an easy path. But I think we're excited about that in the sense that it ensures that whatever we do move forward will be I think a successful project that really has very rigorous environmental and community standards incorporated into the final project. And to that extent the status of the project is we're still in the the development phase. A key milestone is the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management leasing process and when they move that forward in California. Knock on wood, I think we're hoping that will be sometime the end of this year, beginning of next year. And then once that process moves forward, there'll be an opportunity to really kind of dig into the permitting process and the design process. As far as what I'm most proud of, I think it's that a fisherman has not thrown a brick through my window yet. And one of the things we really wanted to do with that sort of approach that we've taken was to be like proactive and not reactive. And we've certainly seen in the past where in various industries and types of endeavors, outside companies come in and are sort of have more of sort of an extractive approach and not necessarily really aligned with our community's values. And so we really wanted to make sure that this was done in a way that engaged the community and gave the community a seat at the decision making table. And so we started our engagement with local tribes and fishermen and other stakeholders sort of early, and have kind of tried to keep that where they're the first to know about stuff, not the last to know about it. And so far that's been successful in having good conversations and making progress on working towards good outcomes. And so thanks for having me, and looking forward to the conversation.
That's great. Thank you very much. And I just want to remind people that we do have a chat room because there's so many of us. It's likely we're going to be reviewing the questions in the chat room, and hopefully we're going to be able to respond to many of them. So please ask your questions. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Kristen, who will drill down on some of these great stories.
Yeah, thanks, Jen, and thanks again to you speakers. So being from the National Working Waterfront Network, I think it's no surprise that one of the things that I'd like you all to discuss, if you would please, is the impacts of your projects on working waterfronts. We hear a lot in other venues about the offshore on the ocean impacts of projects to both natural resources and other uses. But it's also important to consider that offshore energy can impact the working waterfronts. For example, where are components assembled, where are operation and maintenance vessels docked, and where are they serviced? How does that affect other ocean users who also need that working waterfront? So I'm wondering if any of you folks could look at or speak to how you've considered working waterfronts as part of your overall project, and whether or not, I think it's probably too early to say whether or not there have been any impacts on the working waterfronts, but to the extent that you've observed any, I'd love to hear about that as well.
So one of the advantages to floating offshore wind technology, I think, and one of the reasons being pursued nationally, internationally, is the reduction of cost you can get by assembling on land or shoreside next to the dock and then towing it out, rather than trying to build and assemble at sea. So that does take a working waterfront component to do that. In Maine, we've been fortunate enough since day one in demonstrating this project that in proximity, we have Maine Department of Transportation, Maine Port Authority port, Mac Point in Searsport, that has already been a working waterfront and a place where most of the land-based wind turbine components have been coming in. So they're regularly seeing shipments of turbines and blades and towers coming in, and they have that laydown space there already. So we're taking advantage of that existing infrastructure and thinking about how other components can be manufactured nearby to be brought there to be assembled. So It has been working directly with the terminal operator, and I have to say it's been very, very supportive from the Department of Transportation, everybody, to work in that existing working waterfront so that it's not, you know, a displacement per se. It is a waterfront that terminal has been a fossil fuel terminal as well as a dry goods terminal. So there is a couple of piers there that are, but there seems to be space to be able to accommodate everybody. The idea of operation and maintenance is an important one, and having crew transfer vessels or other vessels that can support that. We work with the developer, and everybody's talking about where is the right place to put those ports for a single turbine project, a single vessel that's accessible and has a regular, you know, a relatively short turnaround time to get in there, leaves many options. But having a single 60, 70-foot vessel within an existing working waterfront that has a crane capacity and nearby crew accommodations are two different things than whether it's a, you know, a larger farm that needs, you know, 7 or 8 vessels. So that certainly is an avenue that needs to continue to be developed. And we've done some discussions with other working waterfront. There are also working waterfront considerations where you have the cable landing and making sure that if you bring a cable to shore that you can do it in a way and to assure everybody that you know, bringing cable to shore and bringing it up on shore, and then having a place where it transitions to shoreside infrastructure, it can be integrated into an existing waterfront, whether it's a commercial working industrial waterfront or some others. There is those considerations, and I think that's a, you know, a landing by landing consideration. At least in that instance, it's sort of a one and done. Once it's installed and in place, it shouldn't have any other displacement.
Thank you for that, Jake. Dan or Matthew, do you guys have anything to add from your projects?
Yeah, I can jump in. I think the interesting thing with a wave energy test facility is, you know, there's going to be a lot of turnaround of devices. You know, we have 4 test berths, so there'll be various different technologies being tested, moving in and out. So there's going to be a significant amount of marine services that are required to support the project. It's one of the reasons, you know, this project's actually pretty well supported by the communities up and down the coast. And part of it is they see this as an opportunity for working waterfronts and the marine industry to support and expand upon. You know, fisheries is the biggest industry along the coast of Oregon, but they're looking to diversify, and they see testing, not commercialization, but testing as a nice supporting technology that could fit in well with the working waterfronts and increase the opportunities for some of these industries that maybe aren't fully utilized with what's going on at the moment.
Yeah, I'll just add, you know, I think for our community, you know, one of the things that people are actually most excited about is the opportunity for port redevelopment and actually putting our waterfronts to work. You know, for Humboldt Bay, you know, back in the last century, we had a thriving timber industry, which maybe was a little too thriving and is now kind of, you know, gotten to I would say a more sustainable level. And it's still, you know, a major economic force, but it's nowhere near at the scale that it used to be. And so, you know, if you look at old photos of Humboldt Bay, there's, you know, pulp mills, lumber mills, you know, tons of development around the harbor, you know, and as that industry has kind of, you know, retracted to its current state, you know, we just have like literally hundreds of acres of coastal dependent industrial zoned property that is just, you know, underutilized is a nice way to put it. Is, you know, growing weeds and, you know, crumbling concrete, you know, dock infrastructure that's literally, you know, rotting away and kind of disappearing because there's just not, you know, a current use for the majority of that. You know, there's still some forest products shipping and obviously some commercial fishing activity, but you know, nothing at the scale that used to be there. And so this is really seen as kind of an opportunity to take advantage of all that space and that infrastructure, you know, and get it back into a, you know, a useful status. And you know, as Jake noted, one of the things that's neat about floating foundation based wind projects is, you know, unlike doing fixed foundations where you have to have a bunch of fancy vessels and you're kind of doing everything out in the ocean. You can do a lot of the work and assembly, in the harbor, which is, safer and easier to do in a harbor instead of out in the middle of the ocean. But also, that creates the opportunity for, a harbor like Humboldt Bay to not, to serve projects, kind of right off our coast, but potentially, to the south and north, in Oregon or Central California. And so, that's where I think a lot of people are really excited about this to potentially be, a chance for Humboldt to reposition itself as an offshore wind hub, and one of the key things too about when you're thinking about floating these wind turbines out, the vertical draft of a wind turbine that's about as tall as the Golden Gate Bridge can't fit underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. So, San Francisco Bay is basically kind of off limits. I mean, in the sense that it's just not viable. You need to have no bridges or other, vertical obstructions if you're floating these in and out. And so, that actually is one of the things, again, that's sort of in Humboldt Bay's favor. If people say, why aren't they just going to do this in San Francisco? And it's like, well, land is going to be a lot more expensive down there, and you actually can't get these past the Golden Gate Bridge. So you've got that restriction. So we're quite excited about the waterfront potential.
That's great. No, thanks to you all. You made a lot of interesting points. And if we have time later, I'd love to come back to this question and talk a little bit more maybe about what a regional approach to offshore renewable energy and waterfront planning might look like. But just in terms of moving on to another topic that I think each of you, again, touched on in your recordings was the importance of involving multiple perspectives in your projects. And I think you all also alluded to this fact in your introductory remarks. So I think that underscores the importance of this for the success of your project. I'm wondering if you could spend a couple of minutes discussing a little bit more about how you've engaged stakeholders and to what end. And additionally, how do you plan on continuing to engage them? In particular, are there tools or strategies that have worked really well that you want to continue, or things that have happened that you'd like to avoid in the future? Really just any good lessons learned to pass along to the folks listening today.
Yeah, I could jump in to start. Kind of just going back to that concept of, sort of involving people in the process, early and often, because I feel like, in many cases, whether it's environmental groups or commercial fishermen or, local tribes, there's often sort of like, a project or a development will kind of get to the stage where they're sort of ready to release their permitting plans and their, environmental review documents. And then people are kind of reacting to that and saying, oh, now I got to respond to this. And, we've really been trying to take the approach of like, well, let's get everybody's input before we even get to that stage, so that when we start putting out, more concrete, documents or concepts or plans, that those already reflect that input, instead of having people have to be sort of on the defense. And particularly with commercial fishermen, like I said, having people be the first to know, not the last to know, one, gives them a little bit of sense of trust and inclusion, and the opportunity to be heard, and assuming that you actually listen and incorporate their input, then you're preventing kind of that potential conflict before it arises, or able to kind of deal with those things front and center, instead of kind of trying to cover it after the fact. And when we had this process of issuing the request for qualifications for development partners, that was one of the things we wanted to actually say, well, instead of waiting for a developer to kind of pick us and then hoping that they reflect our values, let's be proactive and pick the developer that we want to work with, and get them to commit to what we want. And so we actually, when we were interviewing developers for this public-private partnership model, we had somebody from the Commercial Fishermen's Association, a representative from one of the local tribes, labor, economic development, environmental groups. And so, sort of trying to flip the narrative, where it's like, oh, the commercial fishermen are the ones asking the questions of saying, hey, developer, tell me how you're going to do a good job and why we should pick you. And, truly having them be part of that process. And that's not to say that, we're all good to go from here on out. It's an ongoing effort. And so, we can't sort of rest on our laurels. We have to kind of continue that approach to engagement throughout the whole process. And, I'm sure there'll be times where it gets stickier, and, we get into the weeds on issues that are more challenging on whatever front. But, I think just having people feel like they're a part of the process, not on the outside kind of looking in and trying to react.
Great, thanks, Dan.
Yeah, Yeah, I'll jump in. The whole public engagement process with the PacWave South project was interesting because the first step was people from our team working with Oregon Sea Grant, going out to various communities, holding meetings to find out if there was interest from those communities in us siting our wave energy test site in the ocean off their communities. And that they originally talked to 4 communities and then shortlisted it down to 2. And then those communities put together committees and put together proposals to say why we should locate our facility in their community. So there was already interest and support for the idea of having a wave energy test site off their community. And one of the key things in all of this was the fishermen, and the engagement we had with the fishermen has been from the get-go. And in fact, it was actually the local fishermen who selected the location of our site. We gave them certain criteria, and the story is they got together, put a chart out on the table and got out a Sharpie, and after 20 minutes, they drew a box on it and said, put it in there and we're okay with it. It's interesting to work on a project where generally people are supportive and interested in having the project happen. I've been involved in projects where that's not the case. And engagement is just going to continue. I think the community and the fishermen are part of this project and have a say in it. And, we know we wouldn't be here without that level of support. And we also know that we're responsible for maintaining those relationships, because if things go bad, then things can change very, very quickly, and it's critical to keep that level of support moving forward.
Thanks, Dan. Jake, do you want to speak to this as well?
Yeah, and I used to have hair when I started all this, so you can tell the impact of community engagement is. And what I would say is there's never enough community engagement, and there's always too much community engagement. There's just no simple balance. And the closer you are to ground zero, the more you have to really understand the difference between motivation, emotion, science, and everything. So as a university kickoff project, we have scientists and engineers who everything makes perfect sense and is logical, and you can reference scientific articles and all that kind of stuff. But it's really a challenge for many people to uptake that much information and make that assessment. So the trial by social media is really the unfortunate part of this. Our ground zero is Monhegan, and we worked with them for several years before we realized that the people who were directly involved in working on the project with us were not necessarily disseminating it throughout the community as much as we might have thought it was. And so until we established the Monhegan Energy Task Force, which then became a weekly touch base, they have several members, we have several members, and every week it's project update. And it took a lot of time to build the confidence and trust that they needed to be the first to know of things. And one of the things that people don't like is when projects change. And when you take a look at our project over the time, 11 years, there's been, starts and stops and changes, going from turbine size to a single turbine to which way the cable's going to go. And a lot of that was driven by input, but people who didn't understand that we were taking their input to making those decisions then just constantly point to changes. And to the point where we still don't have permits in place yet. So there's no real place for the public to react to the final design. They're always questioning whether this is true or this isn't true, and all the facts. So it's been a very big challenge. We have done hundreds of workshops and seminars. Sea Grant led many of them in the early days. State has a much bigger role in doing that now. So I would just say that there's the other part is we started before offshore wind was really had any type of momentum in the Northeast. It was actually a good thing when Block Island was built, because we could take people down there and show them what it looked like, show them what it sounded like. You could start looking and seeing what it was like to be, fish in those areas. And that's really helped at least put some real sense to what a project looks like. And as the Northeast has developed and more wind area and energy areas have been identified, that also has increased the overall idea that this is a massive industry coming, which has not necessarily helped with a lot of things. So continuing to have engagement, continuing to meet people where they are. There's been a lot of one-on-one meetings on docks, on boats, the fishing community. We continue to reach out to them and engage them, but you know, it has not been a smooth road, and right now it's probably one of the most contentious issues in the Maine fishing industry.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jake. I know recently your project was in the news for a flotilla of sorts out there inspecting activities. And so interestingly, we reached out to Representative Genevieve McDonald, who was able to join us. She's in our virtual audience today, and I'm going to ask her to turn on her camera if she wishes, but certainly unmute herself. Representative McDonald is she's a commercial lobster boat captain in Stonington, Maine, but she's also a member of the Maine House of Representatives. So she serves as the House Chair of Government Oversight Committee, and she's on the Joint Standing Committee on Marine Resources. She's also the Down East Region representative on the Maine Lobster Advisory Council and a member of the Maine Climate Council. And as if that wasn't enough, Representative McDonald is also a fisheries liaison for the New England Aqua Ventus project. And so we were hoping, Representative McDonald, that you might speak a little bit about your experience with the Aqua Ventus project from both your perspective as an elected official and as a commercial fisherman. You know, what's working well, what are things not to continue to do moving forward.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me here today. I'm happy to talk about this. There is a lot going on in Maine right now. And I will say to the folks working on the other two projects and for the audience, there is a very big difference when you are talking to communities and talking to the fishing industry about a project. And as we recently learned, when you are seeing the first tangible evidence of development, in our case, when the survey vessels came. So that created this, this wave of people that sort of knew that offshore wind was happening, sort of knew it was discussed, knew that the legislature had talked about it, but were really faced with the first evidence of pre-construction. And so it really initiated sort of a firestorm, unfortunately. We are dealing with some very strong political polarization in Maine right now, which is adding to this challenge. And then, of course, the pandemic. So fishermen, as Jake said, and others I'm sure will agree, you need to meet them where they are. And we weren't able to do that. So it's been challenging to try to get people to engage over Zoom, to have webinars. There's another project in Maine. Also, the governor's energy office is working with engaging stakeholders about siting. And the pandemic has presented some challenges that were really insurmountable. I mean, fishermen, they don't use Zoom. You can't get together in a room with a chart and a Sharpie, which is what I was hoping for and is how I've always operated and is very successful. I'm very happy that most of us are vaccinated now and that we'll continue to be, and hopefully soon we can be back in harbors and on boats and, you know, at the bar, for lack of a better place to be, to talk about this. So I'm happy to talk a little bit about the concerns of the fishing industry. The fishing industry doesn't like change. You know, these are legacy heritage industries that have been this way for hundreds of years and multiple generations. And just the idea of, you know, something new, something maybe a little scary, something that may displace them, something that may have environmental impacts, maybe economic impacts, is very concerning for the fishing industry. So there are a lot of answers to these questions, particularly the environmental and ecological pieces. But right now it's challenging to get people to stop yelling long enough to come to the table and listen. So I have been looking forward to the public hearings that will happen as part of the NEPA process, because I hope that will answer some of the concerns that the industry has. And they're very valid. I mean, we have issues here with North Atlantic right whale and new fishing regulations. And so people are just really concerned about what the environmental impacts may be, both on the right whale and also on the ecosystem of the state of Maine. We spend a lot of time talking about it. Let's see, what else did I want to talk about today? I guess really I can't drive home the point often enough about the value of, you know, tangible meetings, of charts and being on boats and seeing people in their harbors, having face-to-face communication. You know, as Jake said, trial by fire on social media, you know, it's pretty brutal. We're experiencing it right now. But I do think that there's still a lot of future potential here. The University of Maine did a lot of groundwork starting in 2009. There's been a lot of communication with the community. There's been a lot of communication with fishermen on the mainland, and we are at a flashpoint right now, but I do think that we will be able to move past it when we can be together again. So happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you so much for your perspective. I think when we talk about working waterfronts in the network, stakeholder engagement always comes up, and you know, fisheries have always been a large part of what we plan for. And with the increase in offshore renewable energy, it's important to the network, I think, to continue to find ways to successfully bring other voices, so not just the fisheries voice, you know, the marinas, the boatyards, all of those to the table with offshore wind. So hopefully we'll be able to continue this conversation in other venues. I do want to allow for time for questions that are coming in through the chat. So Jen, do you want to help me out? I haven't been monitoring the chat, but
so I have a question. I'm going to direct it to Dan, but I think all of you could answer this question. Is Marianne had a question about you know, the huge onshore infrastructure and needing to like land, you know, cables and the you know, the land infrastructure, which is potentially threatening the environment and habitats and local people's lives. How have you resolved this, or what are some considerations, maybe some tools that you've used to minimize your effects on the land with cable and working waterfronts to some degree?
Yeah, that's a good question. Our cable landing is actually not in a working waterfront. It's actually in a coastal state park, which sounds slightly strange, but there was multiple reasons for that. One of which was that the discussions with fishermen and our geophysical and geotechnical surveys, there's basically a rocky reef system directly inshore of where our test site is, which is a prime fishing ground for a lot of fishermen. And we were told pretty categorically to avoid that, which actually puts us then coming down to the south of it to this state park, which basically the routes we're looking at is pretty much sandy bottom all the way. There's no sort of particularly sensitive habitat that we're going to be running our cables, burying our cables through. And then in the near shore, we're installing all our cables through conduits. They're installed through horizontal directional drilling. So we drill under the dunes, under the beach, and break out almost a mile offshore. So a lot of that impact is minimized. And then our terrestrial infrastructure is actually going to be all installed underneath an existing parking lot. And then the cables run to sort of power conditioning facility that we'll be building. So we've worked very hard to really minimize the environmental impacts, and we're definitely not displacing any existing marine industrial working waterfront operations for what we're doing, just coincidentally for where, you know, where our site is going to be.
Great. And there's a lot of oh, go ahead, Jake.
I was just going to say, this is the cable. That's the diameter. This is actually a chunk of a cable that powers one of the islands in Maine, but it's about the same size, 7 inches, that will do the Mohegan. So we're not talking about something that's enormous and huge, and it is all regulated by Army Corps of Engineers when you come into shore, shoreland zoning and permitting by the local municipality and the state. And it falls under the same categories as much as the rest of the electrical infrastructure on the shore. So I mean, in this particular case, we're going to have you know, a transformer that is not atypical to what you would see driving up and down the side of the road. When you get to bigger projects, one of the advantages that we're looking at is where there are existing near shore substations, so that the onshore infrastructure is already there. You're plugging into the grid where the existing infrastructure is already there. And in many cases in the Northeast, we also have plants that have been removed. In Maine, there's a nuclear power plant that was removed. So the grid infrastructure is there already, so capacity to take things. So where you look at plugging into existing infrastructure, you can really minimize any additional need. But the horizontal directional boring, the shore side of the technology, it's really minimal compared to what's already existing.
Great, thank you. The other question, there's a lot of questions about, you know, again, we recognize that offshore renewable energy, the goal is to reduce our carbon footprint, but there's many from Andy Bennett to Dave Brown to even Will Cotta, who are asking questions about the materials that you're using to develop your floating turbines or your your structures. And like, for example, there's questions about cement and are there alternatives to cement, and also traditionally moored systems have large anchor spreads compared to tension leg platforms. Have you considered the use of tension leg platforms? And Matthew, I know I don't know if your community group or your consultants and team have thought about that level of reducing the impact on the natural environment.
Yeah, so we certainly looked at a number of options. The foundation system we're looking at is steel floating sort of semi-submersible style unit that would not be a tension leg design, and part of that has to do with the water depths, because we're talking like 25-30 miles off the coast, which here in California means very, very deep waters. And so, I think one of the questions is, well, what is the sort of impact of that? And that's where, we're looking to I wouldn't say do a technology pilot in the sense that, the foundation systems we're using are, currently floating off the coast of Portugal in very similar conditions. So it exists, we don't need to prove that it can be done because it's been done in Europe. But we need to see how it works here as far as, environmental interactions and interactions with fishing. And so that's where, we felt like starting with, sort of like a commercial demonstration of, okay, let's do 10 turbines. That's not like crossing the Rubicon of, having hundreds of these things off the coast to start, but it's enough to sort of get a handle of like, well, okay, if you're fishing out there, okay, maybe you can't drag a net, but can you fish for albacore? And again, because of the scale and spacing of these, about a mile apart, it's technically feasible that you could do certain types of gear fishing amidst this. Now, whether people want to or whether the Coast Guard says that's okay, I think that's where we want to kind of let people kick the tires and see what this is actually like in the real world, and say, okay, scaling this up would be okay, not scaling this up, and then also just to see what wildlife interactions are. Again, there's examples of other projects around the world, but we've got different species and different conditions here. So do whales kind of just cruise on through the cable array, or do they go around it? And you don't really know until you get one of our whales to have that choice. Entanglement for marine mammals directly isn't an issue because the anchor cables are more along the lines of like the thickness of a telephone pole, so it's not something that like a whale can wrap itself up. But you could have gear loss. That's something where having high quality monitoring and the ability to detect if stray fishing gear catches on a cable, and that's something that a marine mammal could get entangled in. And so the good news is developers don't want a bunch of fishing gear catching on their stuff and hanging off of the cables. And so having sensors and all that can detect that, so you can clear that gear quickly. But those are all things that are again, the devil's in the details, and so we're hoping to work with environmental groups and all the permitting agencies to kind of hash out those specifics.
I heard Maine was testing some technology that might work really well out there.
Along those lines, if I can, yeah, so we actually have been at this quite a long time, and our first, before we even settled on this hull design, was to look at the available technologies, the tension leg, the spar, and the semi-submersible, to figure out. We did a lot of 1/50th scale model testing in a wind wave basin in the Netherlands, and also the economic modeling, and we actually reviewed commercial designs, or designs that commercial companies that were putting forward, with the look of what could be not only affordable to make sure that the economics of energy generation work, but also where you could generate that local economic impact. And Maine has no steel mills. They don't, and while we have steel fabrication at places like the shipbuilders Bath Iron Works, we really don't have the capacity to build large structures economically. And our look around the world said, if you build at steel, you're bringing in pieces and parts from other parts of the world in order. So you wouldn't have the economic benefit. And when you start transporting things from Southeast Asia, you have the embedded energy and carbon issues associated with that. At the same time, we're very aware of the concrete, the cement issue, and have are plugged into all the work on lowering the carbon footprint of cement, and also have ongoing work for our own of how do we sequester carbon into cement process by bringing in other components, materials. So there's no answer today, but those are the things that we're trying to answer before a technology starts to be hundreds of units. The Tension Lake platform was another piece of that we did look at, and it has a lot to do with the type of bottom we have in the state of Maine and how well it is, how easy you can or not anchor, and all this technology is one anchoring technology well understood from decades of experience in offshore oil and gas. So you have real companies who do it all the time, real cost estimates, real understanding of design and certification. ABS certifies, designs DNV, depending on where you are in the world. So it all does, it's all taken into consideration. There is room for an improvement. While we're designing around standard chain mooring systems, chain embedment anchor systems right now, we just got a DOE grant to look at synthetic mooring lines, which help shorten the scope, reduce the footprint, and hopefully reduce some of the overall costs, or at least the installation complexity. And so we're just kicking off that analysis, and hopefully we'll have good information to use in future designs on that. And again, with the fishing, the coexistence, by putting the first one on Monhegan, we'll get a better sense of the trap fishery issues and how to mark and how close. The ghost gear issue is, in Monhegan, there's not a lot of midwater or bottom trawl, so it's mostly a vertical line from lobster trap, but gear getting wrapped around the chain and then having ghost gear, ghost lines, that's a concern for everybody. And as Matt said, there's not a developer out there that wants stuff hanging on their thing anyways. Anything that risks the operation or the sale of electricity is a bad thing. So there's a very compatible reason to make sure the mooring systems work in a coexistence.
Yeah, if I may just.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Do you want to answer that too? And then we're running out of time, so I just want to make sure we have enough time. So if you could give us a short answer. Yeah,
I will do. One of the reasons the value of a wave energy test site is that wave energy technology is probably like wind was 20 years ago. There isn't even a convergence in the types of devices yet. So there's lots of opportunity to get steel in the water and start looking at different mooring systems, different types of devices, and try and work out what's going to be the best, both for power generation survivability, but also the minimizing the environmental impact. And that's why a test site where you can rotate through different technologies and test them in the open ocean at full scale is so critical for evolving this the industry.
Thank you. Sorry to have to cut it off. I have a feeling we should have made this a 90-minute webinar. The webinar series that URI puts on that we're part of is called Learning as We Go. So as we prepare to head out from our afternoon together, I'm wondering if you all could just provide a minute or two of words of wisdom, things that you would suggest to others looking to develop test facilities or engage stakeholders or procure renewable energy as a county or a community. Any words of wisdom for our attendees today?
I'm happy to go first. So I will say, when it comes to stakeholder engagement, there is always room for improvement and there are always lessons learned, but there is also a point where the rubber meets the road and projects move forward and you have to lead by example. And so finding that convergence, that sweet spot is hopefully where we're at Maine right now. And I look forward to the future of offshore energy in Maine.
I was just going to say, I think one of the critical things is just being mindful of the fact that when people have concerns, they are genuine. It may be that people don't fully understand, there's all sorts of reasons. And what we've found, and it's kind of supported, strengthened by the fact that we're coming from a university, we're not a commercial developer, is we can be straightforward and honest about stuff. There's a huge amount of unknowns with what we're trying to do. And we quite often shock people when we're honest about the fact that, we're going to have adaptive management. We're going to be making this up as we go along, but doing it as carefully as we can as we take little steps moving forward. And I think that's just a critical thing for any project, is that honesty with the stakeholders really goes a long, long way.
So you both took the words right out of my mouth, and you know, you just got to keep going, and open and transparent, and be willing to answer as many questions over and over as you can, even though it seems like it's redundant. It's never redundant to someone new. So,
Jake, do you have advice for the stakeholders?
wow, you know, I mean, it's what we all do, right? When we don't know something, we Google it, or we look for someplace else, and there's a lot of good information available. But I think people today are much more reluctant to pick up a phone or to reach out. They rely on a passive, you know, approach. So the more people can get engaged, and that's really up to us to find ways to enable them to be engaged. And so I would say that we had dozens of meetings on Monhegan where people would come to meetings, not ask a question, but they would catch you walking down the street or catch you walking on the dock. So and a stakeholder has to be open to asking the questions and open to finding answers and willing to say what their concerns are, but also willing to listen.
Matthew, did you have any parting words?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, everything that was just said of, you know, kind of being open and transparent, and, you know, and not being afraid to maybe not know the answer to questions, because sometimes I think people try to, you know, control the message and like, well, I don't want to go in this meeting if I can't answer every question and have, you know, a firm answer. And I think that's where people then feel like you're holding your cards close to your chest and you're like hiding stuff from them. And it's better just to say, hey, you know, I'm gonna put everything I got on the table, and some of it's very fuzzy and I don't know. And you know, if you're genuine about that, then I think people can, you know, can help to, you know, help the process along. And, you know, I think also, you know, just making sure that you've got, you know, local engagement, because I think that's, again, when you've got, you know, entities or companies coming from out of the area, you know, whether they're state or, you know, federal government or private companies, you know, there's kind of that, you know, I think justified concern of like, well, you're not from here, you know, you know, and that's why I make the joke about my window, because like you could look up my home address in the phone book, and so if they like don't like what I'm doing, you know, and conversely, it's like if I turn my webcam around, I can see the Humboldt call area, and so like if it's a bad project, my neighbors are going to see it, and I'm going to see them at the mailbox, and you know, and so I think, you know, making sure that, you know, part of whatever your team is, you know, are folks that are truly invested in, you know, in good outcomes. And if the, you know, if the right outcome is not doing the project, then you know, being open to that, and being just upfront that, you know, you really want to be successful for everybody.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all. I want to thank our panelists, Matthew, Dan, and Jake. Really great experiences, expertise. And again, their presentations, the recorded presentations are really thoughtful. So encourage you to review that. This has been recorded. So if you want to share it with your friends or watch it again, you know, feel free. We will be sending that out in a few days. And again, this is a series of webinars and podcasts at the University of Rhode Island. So just Google URI, Offshore Renewable Energy, and you will see the other webinar series that we've been holding actually over the past 2 years. So, and also opportunities we have a thing called Ask the Expert. So if your question wasn't asked here and you want an answer, come to our website and ask it, and we will do our best to get a good, succinct answer. Again, I want to thank the National Working Waterfront Network for partnering with us on this. Really interesting. Yes, we could have gone on forever. Everyone have a great rest of the day, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time we do this. So thank you very much.